Oh,
Here we go.
dude, that countdown music just makes me want to dance.
It gets me going every time.
Just gets me hyped.
So good.
Dude, are we live on all platforms right now?
We are almost live on all platforms. I'm checking in on LinkedIn right now. We're going to find out. You never know. You never know. There's like 312 things to click to make it happen, but we're doing it. We're live
Nice,
right
dude.
now.
Oh, dude, I'm gonna tag it. I'm gonna share it. Welcome to everybody who's joined us on Zoom. Welcome to anybody who's joining us uh on LinkedIn. I just accepted a thing and I'm sharing
There it
it.
is. LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you're streaming from. Welcome. Excited to have you today. Fun topic today. Um, which is like, you don't think of it as hospitality, but we've been talking about hospitality here for a number of weeks on the podcast. And, we've added this into how we define hospitality because of what we're about to talk about, but food safety.
Yeah.
Food safety, as a form of hospitality is paramount because if the food isn't safe or if you're getting people sick, it doesn't matter if you're smiling, it doesn't matter how fast you go, and it doesn't matter how delicious the food is. So everything else that you normally talk about with hospitality is out the window if the food's not safe. And you and I lived through a crisis, probably the biggest food safety crisis in the past decade, and that's what we're talking about today.
No small topic.
No small topic.
No small topic. Yeah, I mean, if we had to break down our hospitality framework, it's a hierarchical, right? And
Hierarchical. Yeah.
hierarchical, yeah. I mean, everything goes, it's a hierarchy. And yeah, food safety is at the absolute top, just like you're saying. If the food's not safe, like
Who cares?
smiling doesn't matter.
That's right.
Yeah,
They were really nice. I'm throwing up in the bathroom, but they were super nice.
yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, this is something that we never really like fully talked about, and we're not like divulging any like industry secrets or there's no like behind the scenes secrets. So if you came today for that, you're not going to get any of that. This is more just Sam and I's experience living through that food safety crisis at Chipotle, specifically on the training comms op services team, and what our experiences were and kind of some lessons learned. So we're kind of excited to chat about it today.
That's right. I feel like crisis is like a great forcing mechanism for a lot of things too. That like you learn the time is super compressed in a crisis. Stress is high, like consequences matter. So I feel like you learn a lot about a lot of things in a crisis. You learn about people, you learn about what you've built, you learn about what works and what doesn't actually work. And honestly, what matters, because in a crisis, it feels like everyone's focused on like, hey, we got to get some stuff right here. Nothing else really matters except solving the crisis. So you learn a lot about the company and what actually matters in a crisis, which is fascinating. I think, seeing it at one of the biggest food companies in the world, we learned a lot as we went through it that we've now applied it I don't know, every company we've gone to, every company we work with gets the benefit of that experience. So
That's
fun to
right.
talk about it a little bit here.
Like, yeah, in a crisis, I can't have a better way to say it than like what you said. Like you strip away the fluff, right? You strip away the fluff, you streamline, you just do what needs to be done, and then you learn afterwards, like, oh, I guess we could have stripped away the fluff the whole time.
That's right.
We never needed the fluff, apparently. Yeah. Um, I even I think I would love the idea of kind of starting, well, maybe even just to set the table for people who don't know, just in like if there's a small group of people who don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Uh, we'll just kind of say like, so it's been 10 years now, which is crazy to think about. Because it's still anytime I tell somebody, oh, I used to work at Chipotle or I did this thing at Chipotle, they're like, oh, like didn't they have like something happened there like a while back? That's almost like all the time. That's like one of the first things that people say. So it's still like anchored in people's minds to that food safety crisis that happened in 2015. But it was late 2015, early 2016, where there was just this like E. coli outbreak that really started in like the northwest region of the country. And I think like 20-ish people got hospitalized, got sick from an E. coli strain. And it was kind of rooted to that region. And I don't know if there was ever an actual like technical, here's exactly what happened report. There was a lot of like theories and some back and forth. But ultimately it was traced to E. coli, something in the Chipotle supply chain. And if I can even say that, I don't know if that's even 100% proof accurate. But then there was a series of other things that happened. Like there was a norovirus outbreak at a restaurant in Boston where somebody threw up in a hallway and a bunch of people, a whole basketball team got sick. So it was just like a series of bad press around foodborne illness. And as we all know, anybody in the food industry knows like norovirus and foodborne illness is like very common. Um, but it just happened to be kind of happen and compounded on top of this other crisis that Chipotle was in the news for. And as we all know, Chipotle was like kind of high and mighty as far as like talking about ingredients and freshness and like top of the food chain and like we do it better than everybody else. And so it was sort of an easy target, right? For like the media and for people to be like, oh, the guys who always just like are talking about how much better they are than everybody else when it comes to like quality, all of a sudden you're making people sick. And it was like, if you're at the top, it's easy to be a target like that. So it got probably more attention than any other food safety crisis out there that
That's
has.
right. A lot of press, a lot of newsworthy topics. Like it led to the transition of 3 CEOs in the matter of like 12 to 18 months.
Totally.
Where one was removed, the founder then took back over, the founder then stepped down as Brian Nickel then came in. Brian Nickel is now the CEO of Starbucks. Scott Boatwright was brought in as the COO, who's now the CEO of
I live in
Chipotle.
Orange County because of that.
Left Denver.
Honestly, like I mean, I
Yeah,
tell people that all the time, and then they're like, "Oh, wasn't there like some food safety?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's why I live here is because things changed and it led to a new CEO who changed the headquarters, moved it from Denver to Newport, and like there was just a massive ripple effect from like some some infected food.
that's
It,
right.
yeah,
And I think that was our biggest takeaway through it. And we'll talk through some of what we went through, but like the the actual change, like the impact that you feel from a crisis often isn't the crisis itself. It's
Mm.
everything that comes after the crisis, the fallout of leadership changes, the philosophical changes a company has to make to address whatever led to the crisis in the first place. All of those are profound changes to the company, the organization, and the people working for it that are monumental compared to often the crisis itself. Now, if people getting sick is no joke. In our case, like in this case, luckily, no one got so sick that they died. In some cases, historically, people have died from food safety outbreaks. So
Yeah.
it's a very serious thing. So I don't mean to diminish it or like take any of that lightly. The benefit was people got sick, no one irreparably harmed as a result of it. But then the fallout was years of impact to the company that had been 23 years in the making at that point.
And to the industry.
Yes,
Change the industry. I worked with some folks a while back talking about they were doing like traceability work, implementing like RFID in the food supply chain. Um, and basically they were like, oh yeah, this is because of Chipotle. Like we like they were like that changed the industry fundamentally in a way that now we're doing this because of what happened there. That it made it brought it to the forefront. Um, yeah.
exactly. And the benefit was it led to a lot of positive. Like a lot of those things were going on. The traceability team was a huge proponent of tracking every ingredient from farm to all the processing plants, all the way into each individual restaurant. So, what was fascinating about it was that so much work was underway organizationally already that this kind of just sped things up and then became industry best practices.
So you sort of had this like unique opportunity during that time you were freshly put into the role as director of training for Chipotle, which for maybe to also to kind of set the table, that was more than just like training materials. That was like internal communications, op services, training department, learning and development kind of all fell under that umbrella and underneath that title. Whereas maybe today it wouldn't all be. It's not at Chipotle or at other organizations. But at the time that role, so you were overseeing training, like restaurant training, learning and development, field training, um, internal communications, op services, and you were fresh in this role, like really new to this role, young, and you at the kind of it culminated and you What was it? Testifying? Tell us about that.
Yeah, ultimately, as part of this crisis, you go through it, and like when you get people sick, every stone is unturned to figure out what was the root cause of it. And so, training was a part of that. Is were our teams equipped to handle a crisis? Were they handling food appropriately? How did we teach them to cook food appropriately, wash their hands? And so, yeah, our training materials ended up being on display, and I had to go testify about our training materials to um, uh, some major entities that were assessing us to say like what happened here and how do we prevent it from happening again. And that was the ultimate goal that they had in mind, was we got to make sure that we don't get the American public sick. And so it was the training tools and the systems, it was our supply chain, it was the entire company was under investigation. So yeah, I did get to go testify and showed our training materials, walked attorneys through our materials publicly. So training materials on display as part of it, which is something you don't, there's no training for that. That was not part of the job description either. So
Right.
you learn as you go through that. You figure that one out while it's happening.
Yeah, that's wild. Um, and that was sort of, I feel like, the culmination of that. But there was a lot kind of leading up to it. I mean, yeah, I mean, we wanted to kind of share some of the lessons learned, some of the things specifically that you learned just through going through something like this. We were talking earlier, Sam, you were telling me about one of the things specifically for people who maybe they engage a crisis, maybe they go through a crisis. It's like how do you come out of that on the other side? Um, I guess to get to a point where, and even in like your career, or how do you approach that in a way that is not just beneficial for a career, because that sounds sort of like self-serving, but really best for like the team, the community, but also for a career. And I feel like you kind of experienced something something like the way that you handled it was an appropriate way to do it that was beneficial to everybody. I don't know, maybe walk us through that.
Yeah, I think, if in ideally, no one has to go through a crisis. So if you can learn the lessons that others went through, uh, benefit to you. So yeah, I think I feel like the main theme as I approached it and we approached it, you were on the team with me as we went through it, but like as the head of training and as the head of ops services who's testing all the materials at the time, when crisis happens, everyone's trying to scramble and figure out what's going on. It's kind of like red alert, whole company stops and everybody's antennas are up trying to figure out what happened. And I think that's really the starting point at any crisis at any company. And so for us, it was really a decision of like, well, do we jump in and help figure out what's going on and be a part of even the uncovering process? Not even the part of finding the solution, but the part of figuring out what's going on, or do you wait to see what happens next? And I feel like that decision point every single person has
Mm.
in any crisis, to either wait and be told what happens next or to jump in and figure it out. I, because of the relationships that we had across the company, jumped in. And so at the time, as we're figuring it out, we're looking at every process, every ingredient, every person that was in the restaurants in the time. And what it looked like for us was we had a big hierarchy of leadership for Chipotle restaurants. So you had like, if the CEO is the tip of the pyramid, you had COOs underneath them, then regional vice presidents, directors, and then general managers inside the stores. Every one of those hierarchies needs to be involved as you're figuring out what happens. And so my role really became liaising. I don't know what the word is there. Talking,
Reasoning.
liaisoning with each of those folks to figure out, well, what happened, what's working, what's not working. And in diving in, my job shifted immediately, like shifted overnight from whatever your normal day job was to it was 20 hours a week, not exaggerating, or 20 hours a day. Sorry, 20 hours a week would have been sweet. Uh, 20 hours a day for months trying to figure out what happened. Because in the beginning, we're uncovering every ingredient, every recipe, trying to figure out what happened. It was minimal sleeping, and I was flying all over the country. We'd be flying to some of the investigation spots. So I'd be flying to Oklahoma. I'd be flying to California. We'd be working with food safety scientists who are testing things. Like I remember in California, as we were going through, one of the thoughts was that it could be lettuce, and we hand washed lettuce inside the store. In this case, they were like bleaching this scientist from the outside, not a Chipotle employee, not ever an official policy, was like, yeah, I'm going to add, let's do a mixture of bleach inside the restaurants to wash lettuce with. So I fly to California. They're like, go check out what this guy's doing. I walk in and he's got bleach inside of a restaurant touching lettuce that was never served to a customer. But
Yeah.
like this was his idea that he was testing. And I was like, no, 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 no. Like we are not putting bleach, raw bleach on top of lettuce and serving that together. That's insane. But
Yeah.
that was like a day. And then you're flying back to report back to a committee of people of like, we're not, don't listen to that guy. We're not doing that. What else do we have over? And it was every day you're flying across the country, testing things, trying to uncover. But in part of that is you're trying to uncover what's going on and you're a part of that process. And I feel like that's the thing that when crisis happens, a lot of people want to be a part of the solution. I want to be a part of the team that like figures it out, puts the thing in place, makes it right. Well, the people that do that are the people that were there while we figured out what was wrong in the first place. And I
Mm.
think I didn't know I was making that decision, but looking back on it, I've seen a lot of folks as they go through crisis or they go through emergency response in a company who were like, oh, I wish I could be a part of that. I wish I could play a role in the change or in the thing. You don't get to play that role if you're not there in the beginning, helping be in the weeds to figure out what the problem is, because that's where the trust is earned. That's
Mm.
where all of the decisions actually get made. The actual solutioning that goes out into a business is a result of all of the work that was done before. So I think I lucked into that, but that really set us up that we were out there on the front lines the second it happened. Like, let's figure this out with the company as opposed to being waiting to be told what happens next.
Yeah. I love that mentality of just not waiting to be told and just jumping in and like any crisis. You know what I mean? Like if
That's
you
right.
want to influence it, if you want to affect it, not being the person that's waiting to be told what to do next.
That's right.
Uh,
And it like, and in our case, it was like I didn't know what to do. I was brand new, like no one knew what to do.
right.
And that was the eye-opening thing for me is once I started opening of like, what can I do? Where can I get? They're like, go to California and meet this guy, come back and tell us what. I'm like, okay, I can go do that.
Yeah.
But you get back and you're like, no one knows what's going on. You're like,
Right.
the officers of the company are all trying to figure out what's going on. You got lawyers and legal counsel. No one knows. And so once I think that then opened it up to be like, oh, well, good thing I'm not waiting because no one knows. So the
Yeah.
people I thought would know, no one has any clue what to do. And so now we're all in it together and we're all figuring it out together. But now you're a part of the conversation.
Yeah. That's always an eye-opening experience when you realize, especially young, when we're like, oh, these people know what to do. And you're like, oh wait, no, nobody knows what to
No
do.
one knows, especially this. No one had gone through something at this scale. So we're all figuring it out together. So I think, right mentality at the right time. But I think you and I
Yeah.
learned this a lot. And we've talked about this a lot since then, that like the other benefit is that when the crisis happened, it's not like we had just started building things at that point to solve it. Like
Yeah.
the benefit of what happened was we had been building some things for years in advance that enabled our success. Because like in a crisis, I think this is what you and I have learned more than anything is that communication becomes the only thing that matters at a company to the entire organization, keeping
Yeah.
people up to date on what's happening, what's changing. And so for us, communication became the name of the game, but it was something that we had been working on for years before then.
That's right. Like having streamlined, clear communication, especially for like an op services, like implementing something new, which ultimately during this experience, like almost on a daily basis, there were people wanting to add new things to the restaurants. Almost on a daily basis, they were wanting to change procedures, implement new processes, communicate new information on a daily basis. And so our team kind of became the gatekeepers of the cadence of like how that stuff could be communicated, when it could be communicated, the most effective way to communicate it. And it's like, okay, yeah, maybe this is the most effective way, but you can't do it every day. You can't just like, okay, maybe you're in the food safety team, but you can't just like email all these restaurants. Like, you know what I mean? And so like having that, like the fact that we already had an established communication cadence and an established effective communication platform and a medium to communicate with people regularly and effectively, um, I think made a huge difference in being able to kind of right the ship in an organization that large. Because at that time it was, I don't know, 2,200 restaurants or something like that. at the time, maybe
Yeah,
10 years ago.
50, 60,000 people across the
Yeah.
globe.
Um, so like you're saying, we had kind of already built an infrastructure of communications and rollouts and a cadence to that and a platform for that that had proved effective. And all of a sudden, it got a lot of attention because it was like, oh, this is the team that can effectively communicate with all of our restaurants and quickly implement change. So then all of a sudden we had the entire executive team knocking on the door saying, okay, I want to get in on this. I want to get in on your platform. I want to leverage your channels. Because now we have something to say. Uh, yeah, which was interesting to see.
I think so. Cause like leading up to that, like we had um video communications that would go out every week of just news that was going on. And it was, I mean, you would spend 2 years, 3 years building that
It got a lot of attention because
to
it was like,
figure out
oh, these
that
are
was the
this is
right.
sorry,
You're
our
good.
live stream just started playing.
There's so many windows up right
So
now.
many windows, so many windows.
No, but you would spend 2 or 3 years trying to figure out how do we best communicate with every single restaurant. And we had put technology into restaurants, but this had been an effort because like the challenge we faced pre-crisis was, well, how do we get at all restaurants, 2,200 restaurants, 60,000 people to change behavior?
Yeah,
And that really was the impetus behind internal communications, ops services, and training was we're trying to either get people to cook chicken the right way or become managers of restaurants running the P&L the right way or implement new policies that would come in, a new HR, whatever that came down. But all of it was in an effort to like, we don't just want to email restaurants. We always had the lens, even pre-crisis, of our goal is to change behavior. And
yeah,
if you want to change behavior, you've got to get people to engage with the content and then ultimately act on it. And they're only going to act on what you say if they receive the message, they believe in the message, and they're going to be held accountable to the message.
yeah,
We had a huge problem at the beginning of how do we get people to even get the message, let alone hold people accountable to the message. So emailing the restaurants, no one's reading that email. It's not cascading to teams, but you had uncovered after 2 years of research a way that actually they were engaging without any accountability. Usage was up, views were up before this all happened.
yeah. And we had a ton of engagement through just having this basically just a weekly news video that we put on the homepage of SharePoint. It was the internal like uh basically file sharing system, right? But it
It
was
was
for every single manager's back of house computer's homepage was this file sharing platform. And it was sort of a hub for like links, and they called it chip links. I don't know if they still do, but yeah, we just embedded a video every single Monday morning at 8 a.m. A new video got embedded there that would have crucial information for the week, information on rollouts, visuals of like how to do new things. So managers knew that every single week they would get kind of the crucial information that they needed from that. They also got like an email, they got like quarterly updates, they got packets. We had follow-up tools in order for field leaders to like validate that things were happening. So there was a whole infrastructure, there was a whole system, especially as we started introducing more of that op services role. But as far as just like clear, consistent communication, yeah, we had spent 2 years like never missing a Monday. And I just feel like that was something that in my mind was just like that was the thing that was the most important that I was always like consistent about. And even like when it was like Christmas and New Year's, I was like, no, let's just put up a video that says Merry Christmas. Like, let's not miss it. Let's literally never miss a Monday. Every Monday for like 2 years before the crisis at 8 a.m., there was a new video with it that they would watch that had there was more than just fluff. It was fun. It had crucial information for their job, and it showed people how to do stuff. It taught people how to do stuff. It introduced rollouts, um, and it also, I would like to think built culture because there was a lot of like recognition and stuff like that. But when the time came uh, to communicate throughout the crisis, that kind of became like a main vehicle to communicate information on a regular basis to actually show people how to do stuff. And we there wasn't as much fun in the videos in those days. There was no like dancing emojis and stuff like that, but it was used as like a clear communications tool by the executive team. That's what I was saying. They would be knocking on the studio door to be like, I'm going to be on this. I'm going to talk to the whole company. This is the vehicle to do that. This is the most effective tool that we have. Um, yeah, and to your point, like we kind of built up a system, and it kind of makes you you have to answer the question, is your system that you have to communicate to a large team and are your training tools crisis ready? Are they effective enough um, in order to survive a crisis of that scale? And I think that's sort of a good litmus test. Like you had to go testify that our training materials were that good, you know,
That's right.
and then also like then our communication tools had to actually be used in a crisis in order to right a ship. So they had to pass like the actual test. Um, but it's like it's sort of a good question to ask yourself, like, are the current state of my systems, of my communication systems, or the current state of my tools that we have available to our teams, would they survive a crisis? Would they stand up to that test? Would they be useful in a crisis in order to actually get people the information? And if you're just communicating through like a corner of your learning management system, or if it's like sporadic emails that people don't know when to expect or who to expect it from, or there's no structure to it, um, it probably won't survive a crisis.
I think you're spot on. And I think we learned going through it what kind of those bullet points were of what crisis ready is, because obviously you don't know. But I think we learned that like you need to be able to communicate to 2,500 people in an hour. And
Yeah.
if you had to communicate to your entire company in 1 hour, could you do it today?
Yeah.
You could, because we had a mechanism in place that could do it. We stumbled into that through 2 years of work. But I think that's the question to answer is if you had to communicate to your entire team in 1 hour, could you do it? From an e-learning standpoint, I remember we had during the second round of outbreaks, there was an earnings call that day. Like a report came out right before earnings call happened, and by this time our executive team trusted us. Like we're in the thick of it, we're rolling through it, we're going through this. And so the on the earnings call, I'm listening, um, as you know, every good shareholder should do. Every head of training, you should be listening to your earnings calls. But
Right.
on the earnings call, it was like, we just found out about this. By the end of today, every single manager at the company will go through this training, a refresh on our standards. There was never a communication sent to me. There was no text. There was no like, hey, by the way, I'm going to go tell Wall Street that we're going to do this by the end of today. He just knew that if he said it, I would be listening and that we could pull it off. And so in one day, we had not started. In 6 hours, the whole team rallied, built, I think, one of the most beautiful food safety courses ever made. We got the graphic designers were building the front page while the food safety team is working with writers to write out the course, write out the questions, build the content, get it uploaded into the system, build quizzing, knowledge checks while the communications team is building the communication. This is all happening simultaneously over 6 hours. And in 6 hours, the entire company is taking a brand new training on exactly what we just said on the earnings call. I think one, it was a testament to the team of by that time we had been battle tested to strip out all of the fat.
Yeah.
When you go through a crisis, you realize that there's a lot of fat in the system. There's a lot of time that doesn't need to be spent. There's a lot of decisions that can be made quickly, and we can move really fast if we trust each other and we have the right people in place and we just go. And I think that was the test for the team that day to say, can you train your entire organization in one day? And we could answer the question, yes. And I think that's when we learned how fast we could actually go. We could
Right.
communicate to the entire company in 1 hour. We could train the entire company in one day to get crucial information out there. So it started to reduce these time frames of like, oh, that's what crisis ready is. I can
Right.
communicate with the company in 1 hour. I can train the company in a day, and I'd be willing to testify in front of attorneys that the materials that we're putting out there are accurate, sufficient, and correct.
So there were some of these like systems in place already that made it easier to communicate, easier to navigate. There was a team in place that made it easy, but there were some things that weren't in place that the crisis kind of reshaped our org a little bit. I mean, you talked about how
Fundamentally, yeah,
you had to go fly around the country as like a representative of the training team. And part of that was because we didn't have representatives for training around the country for a business that had locations in almost every single state. There was only really a training team that sat in Denver.
that's right.
Um, And yeah, this crisis really kind of reshaped what the training team looked like and kind of grew it into its next evolution that still exists today.
That's right. And we were global by that point too. I was flying to Paris and London to be checking out how we were doing things there. But at the time, like Chipotle was known historically for not changing their menu. That was one of the more famous things about the brand was that it had scaled that much. And it was basically the same menu that they started with at restaurant one or two. They just did simple things really well and scaled that. And so the result of that was by the time you got to 2,200 locations and 60,000 people, we weren't changing fundamentally that much. Always something is changing. That's why we had weekly videos and things like that. There's always things changing, but fundamentally, the operations were pretty consistent. And so we were able to, for years, run training and operations with training at a very thin layer. It was 8 people at the time between training, communications, and ops services, an 8-person team for 60,000 employees in 2,200 locations. That's a really tiny team
Yeah.
relative to what a lot of brands are facing at this point, because we relied on operations. The way that we could do it was that the layers of operations were so good at teaching and training that they were our extension of the training department. We would work symbiotically together, and that relationship allowed it to happen of everything we did was tied in with operations. We didn't always agree, but we always worked together on how to get it done. But we would make the materials and make things consistent by working with them. And then they would roll it out and they would teach it to their teams. That worked really well until this crisis happened, where we realized that so much was changing in so many places and we had to stay on top of it, that even operations couldn't keep up with implementing all of the changes and making sure that we were consistent. And so that's where the advent happened, where we built out a regional training team. So about 6 months into the crisis, it became really apparent to me in my airline miles. I was Southwest all the way, all over the country. Got a lot of points by the end of this thing.
Dude,
But also
Southwest,
the
man.
operate.
They've gone south with their
Have
now
they?
they charge for bags. Anyways, go
Oh,
on.
I'm in Charlotte now. I can barely even get Southwest out here now. It's not.
Yeah,
Um, but like obviously you can't send a couple people, and we were all going. Like
yeah,
Amber was flying all over the country. Like it was not me alone flying. We were all
totally.
going all over the place. That's not scalable. Like
Yeah.
we couldn't operate in that way. And so
There was no regional representation of the for the training department
exactly.
or op
And so
service.
that became the thing to start figuring out, which was one, we need a more robust training team to support operations at a more regional level, just to keep up with things and keep going and enforce the standards, because things were changing too much now to keep up with. So that led to the advent of the field training team. So as part of that, we built out, interviewed, hired the entire field training team that now exists as part of Chipotle. It's in most brands have a field training team
Yeah,
to some extent. We were able to survive without it until this point. The second then was, and I think you also led this from a communication standpoint, but we realized the field leader or the area manager or multi-unit leader became the linchpin. They were the crucial point between what was happening up top and all the changes and what happened inside of the restaurants. And so we needed to invest in that field leader population to teach them, educate them a little bit more. Because at the time, we had a huge internal promotion rate, which was awesome. But none of that was about leading these massive scale rollouts because it wasn't something that was part of the brand.
yeah,
It was never part of it. And so you had this whole group of people that were in a leadership position that needed to level up their leadership skills at the same time, which was great. So that led to the advent of what we called Cultivate University, which was a whole leadership development program specifically for field leaders. So we built out that team and that function, which grew our team from a team of 8 to a team of another 8 regional trainers. You had new restaurant opening trainers, and then you had the Cultivate University leadership trainer. So the training team tripled in size by the end of this.
yeah,
Not to mention the other teams. Ops services turned from a team of 1 to a team of 3. Communications brought in a chief communications officer, not even an employee doing it, but like a head of the company, because external communications became unbelievably important and not
yeah,
my specialty at all. I was not talking to Wall Street or things like that. You needed somebody who that was their job, was external communication. So
A VP of
whole
food
company
safety that
transformed.
reported into that role, so at least does now.
That's right. VP of
Yeah.
Food Safety Council. We brought in experts
Council.
from across the industry that had dealt with this, that understand the deep science of things like E. coli. Like I know more about how E. coli transfers now from a cow to literally anywhere else in ways
Yeah.
that I don't even want to describe, because
Yeah.
we had experts galore who were teaching
Yeah.
us this is how it transfers, this is where it comes from, this is where the contamination is, and you're following the science of molecules and biology, all to understand how do we run a restaurant safely. So this whole infrastructure got built that didn't exist before as a result of this crisis.
That's wild. That like, and it still exists today is the thing. Like it wasn't, it would be one thing because things always kind of balloon after a crisis, right? Like, and they might, there might not be that many people. I don't know the exact numbers of what exists today at Chipotle, but but like you said, the team 3x'd after this crisis because it was clear that we were just putting too much on the field leaders. We were putting too much on
Oh
the
yeah.
multi-unit managers, right? A field leader in that structure oversaw like eight-ish restaurants. So a multi-unit district leader was responsible for all of that. Was really was yeah was like you said the linchpin, and there was just too much on them. And so what most organizations have are these regional training managers, and that still exists today. That's a whole department at Chipotle. The learning development team didn't exist back then, and now it's a whole department at Chipotle. And I really feel like that reorg, that restructure was birthed out of this crisis. So it reshaped the brand. I mean, we can't even understate. We started out talking about how it led to three new CEOs, how it led to an entire company moving its headquarters. We're headquarters in New York and Denver and Ohio, and the head HQ moved, and it was all kind of birthed out of this crisis. Um, but ultimately, for people who are listening to this, who are really interested in training, learning, development, this sort of professionalized the organization in a way that only a crisis can, and kind of created these new functions that were kind of centered around taking the weight off of these multi-unit leaders. Because I feel like a lot of organizations just expect a field leader to just do everything. I remember we were working with a company. This is sort of a rabbit hole. This is an aside. um, we were working with a company recently, and there was sort of like it was smaller, but there was like a district leader. I'll just say his name was Vic. This was like this was like a year ago. And we were doing like sort of a racy chart where it was just sort of like, hey, here's all this stuff. We're gonna be doing this, we're gonna be doing this, we're gonna be doing this. And anytime something would come up that nobody knew who to assign it to, knew who to make
Yeah.
responsible for it, they would just put his name. And it was sort of like, oh, the one guy who's sort of like a district leader, like just got assigned everything. And I think that's the name of the game. It's like, hey, you're ultimately responsible for these restaurants. You're a district leader. Like you're the guy, you're the gal. Like your name's just gonna get put on everything. Um, and so really it created a new training department, but ultimately it was a support system for the restaurants to be effective and for these multi-unit leaders to be able to actually run restaurants and not have to be expected to do all these other things.
That's right. And even like the way that we communicate with him had to change too. I remember you launched, I think it was at that time, the Field Leader podcast was up and running, but we mentioned we had a weekly video to go inside of the restaurants. But we realized that was more of the like, here's what you do and a little bit of the why. Our field leaders, though, through these changes, we needed them to understand a little bit more of like why this change is happening or why we're driving these things. And so you
Yeah.
created a whole mechanism just to talk to that audience as well through this.
Yeah, we had. I'm gonna shut my window. Give me 2 seconds.
It's so bright. It's
It's
so
so
bright.
bright. I'm so distracted.
The white balance is a little off.
It's a lot. We're live, folks. I had my window open for some reason, and it was cloudy, and then all of a sudden the sun came out, and I turned into a ghost.
Uh-oh.
And we're here talking about videos. We're talking about being professional media people, and
That's
I,
right.
I look like a ghost. Yeah,
You look good now.
we yeah, we had this weekly podcast for field leaders, and the reason we made that is because district leaders, they're on the go. They're not you want to communicate to them wherever they are, and that's on their phone, that's in their car. And so we had that structure in place. And so during the crisis, like every week we would have on like new food, like some of the new food safety leaders that we're bringing in, some of the food safety council, um, some of these experts talking about the whys. And that's really was at the heart of it, was equipping these leaders with some of the information sort of behind the scenes, because we could give all 2,200 managers like do this, do this, do this, do this. And at a certain point, you just have to do it. You can't explain everything to everybody all the time. But for those district leaders, like again, like so much of it was about supporting them. We gave them a behind the scenes look at like, hey, here's why we're making some of these decisions. Um, and all of those leaders had to go through like an advanced HACCP training, like a very advanced food safety training. It gets certified, which was like way above industry standard of what was required in the industry. Um, and yeah, we would use that again, that communication tool that we had established as a way to really explain the whys to them and equip them with a deeper understanding about what was going on, so that, you know, a random district leader in Florida who's maybe never been to the home office, never going to meet any of these food safety people, they're not going to fly around the country, you know, looking at how things are happening. They're not, we kind of wanted to give them an insight into how the sausage was made, or how the barbacoa was kept safe. I don't
Yeah.
know. But that was, yeah, that was a big tool as well that kind of helped equip these leaders, because so much of it was about equipping them, because they were the ones who were actually implementing at the end of the day, and validating and making sure that these things were happening. Um, and people lost their jobs when they didn't, when 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 things didn't happen right. I mean, I don't think that, I don't know if we're allowed to say that, but I mean, it's just it's a well-known fact. Like if people didn't comply, it ultimately meant like people were going to lose jobs because it was
When
that
you're in a
important.
Yeah, when
It
you're in
was
a
that.
crisis and you need
Yeah.
answers, ultimately there's accountability, and there has to be accountability to change the culture.
Yeah. Um, yeah, a lot of changes, a lot of lessons learned. Is there anything you would do differently?
Well, I mean, looking back, I think you would do a million things differently. Like you always look back and you think through, how could I have set myself up for success more? Like even like when you're testifying through your training materials, you're there defending it. And I believed in everything we did and it looked great. And they agreed too. There was no feedback that came back that said, hey, it needs to be different. But you're also looking at it through a different lens. And so I'm looking at the materials at the same time going, man, we can make this better. We can make this so much clearer. We can make this so much more effective.
Right.
Um, the hardest things are when you're that stressed. Like I was working 20-hour days. I was in the restaurant at 4 in the morning, working till midnight regularly. That was the normal schedule, is we'd be testing things at 4 before people started prepping at 6:30. We'd work all day trying to fix things. And then you're going all night testing things again. You're tired and you're exhausted. And so I also think, as you're in it with people, you want to show up a little bit differently. I probably should have slept more. I think a lot of us should have slept more, but you're in a crisis trying to figure it out. So, um, you, I think you would go back and change a lot of things. I think there's some things you wouldn't though, or I wouldn't. I look at it and I say, when we jumped in right away, we had been advocating this will tie a few things we've talked about together. We had been advocating for years for a bigger training department. And like most people listening, you probably want more headcount on your team at some point.
Right.
Like everyone's like, I always need another body. Be great. How do I get another headcount? Well, I think what I learned through this is that by jumping in, by living with the people that make the decisions, the officers of the company, the executives, working alongside them, showing them what was going on, putting in 190%, like everything you had. Um, when I came and said, I can't do anymore, physically, the team can't do anymore, they knew. And usually you've got a debate, you've got a case on your hands to make of how do I get more headcount? When you show your leadership team, we're communicating daily with restaurants. We've got the only mechanism to get out there. We're flying all over the country. We're doing everything we can. The debate then around does that team need more resources becomes a little bit more clear. And
Yeah.
what it taught me then in going to other companies afterwards and now consulting with other companies is like, one, you can do a lot with just a few resources. And two, if you need more headcount, show the team the value of what you're doing, how hard you're working, and that you are maxed out. You've got to make it abundantly clear. And often it's not a hard conversation then if it's a strategic priority. Like by the time we got to creating the regional training team or the Cultivate University team, it was abundantly clear to the entire organization that that needed to happen. So advocating for headcount became less of a concern then. And it was more like, no, that's the right thing to do. What's the right number? What's the right cost? All of that. And so I think, though, all of that was by investing the time up front and really spending time with the officers and leadership team. I think then the other thing that I would not change, and you just said it with the Field Leader podcast too, is the entire intent behind everything we did was to meet the organization where they needed us and how they worked rather than forcing our way on them. And so if you think through the weekly videos that you talk through, you spent 2 years figuring out how will restaurants naturally watch what I have to give them for the news. And we landed on like the simplest solution, which is embedding a video on the website they had to go to log into the computer. Great. Field Leader podcast, same thing. Where are they? They're in their cars driving around from restaurant to restaurant. Let's give them a thing that they can just click play and listen to while they drive around. Immediate adoption through the roof. As we're going around and testing things, like the ability to jump on and fly across the country and just be in a restaurant with the COO in the middle of Atlanta, it's meeting them where they are because that's where they needed you to be,
Yeah.
not forcing the organization to work the way that we worked. I think enabled the success. And I think we've taken that everywhere we go. It doesn't have to be in your LMS. It doesn't have to be on your website. It doesn't have to be a piece of paper. It needs to be how your organization works to be the most effective. And spending your time figuring out how your organization wants to work and communicate will lead to the right answer for whatever else is that you're trying to create. But don't force your mechanism down the throats of your organization.
I love it. User-centered design.
Go figure. It's a thing
Yeah.
for a reason. But like
Yeah.
in a crisis, ultimately, I think that's what enabled it. I think it could have
Yeah.
gone very poorly if we didn't have those videos, if we chose to not fly across the country and wait, and we chose to uh, make our field leaders watch a video on a back of house computer. It would have all failed. It would have all gone miserably. There might be a field training team now, but it wouldn't have happened when it did. There might be a Cultivate University Leadership Academy. It would have been years after that. Like all of it works together to create the result that happened. But I think, we lucked into a few of those things that hopefully others can learn from and take to whatever the next crisis is or fix it before it becomes a crisis.
Ideal scenario right there.
Would
Well, I
you
think it's a
change
good place.
anything?
That's a
Would you
good
go
place
back?
to say what?
Would you change anything? You were in it too. Would you go back and change anything?
Oh man. I mean, I don't know about changing anything. Um, I mean, I feel like the biggest lesson learned was just that like speed of delivery. Like you talked about, like just the ability to like create something in a day that before that that would have taken like 6 weeks and it would have been like, okay, let's come up with a whole project plan and let's put everybody's name on this and like the whole thing, we would have like project managed it to death. Where it was just like, oh, that's not necessary. um but the speed of being able to do something in a crisis kind of teaches you that, oh, we could always do it this fast. And not in a way that like burns you out or kills the team, but just in a way that like, oh, this is possible, like why don't we just always do it this way. And the speed of like bringing something together and rolling it out, it's a sprint, right? But like, and when it actually matters, um and you see that come together, I think that's kind of as far as like from a team perspective. I mean, that was one of the biggest lessons learned from a team's perspective. As far as doing something differently, yeah, I mean, I think that there's nothing that comes to my mind right now, but I appreciate the dive into what you described. Especially the idea of just like jumping in and being a part of the process, being part of the solution, and not just waiting for somebody to tell you what to do. I think that's kind of the probably the biggest lesson learned is being the problem solving team, being the problem solving leaders, being the problem solving department instead of the let's wait for somebody to tell us what to do team. Let's wait for someone to tell us what to do department.
That's right. And don't be afraid that you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Recognizing that literally no one knows what to do.
Yeah.
but be there, be a part of it, jump in, and it'll open up all of the doors down the road.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for joining us live. We appreciate it. Appreciate the folks who showed up here live to listen in on our weekly live podcast show, whatever this is, Training Simplified Live. But we do it every single week, and we're doing it every single week for the rest of the year. Next month in December, next week we're going to be talking about how we teach flow. That was something that's also part of this hospitality program, this hospitality world, is speed of service. We spent years iterating on how to teach speed of service and teaching it in different ways and finding the best ways to do it and the best ways to introduce information. And so we feel like we have some stuff that we could share about best practices in teaching flow, teaching speed of service, teaching throughput, and not just quick service, but in a variety of different formats and a variety of different brands that we've been working with over the years. So next week, we're going to be talking about flow. We're going to be talking about how we teach flow and implement flow in an organization. And then we're going to be in December, we're going to be talking about career path and specifically just our experience in internal promotions, building internal career paths for organizations. Again, at Chipotle, there was this extremely high internal promotion rate that was pretty unique to the industry. And we've been fortunate enough to work with a variety of other brands since then that are doing the same thing and help them implement career paths and tools in order to experience that kind of internal promotion and that internal growth as well. So those are some of the things that we're going to be talking about over the next month. And we would love for you all to continue to join us.
That's right. This was a good one. It was just fun to go back down memory lane here, even though it was a tense topic. But also one hopefully people could learn from, get some lessons out of it to take back to their companies.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Sam, until next time.
Have a great Thanksgiving, Matt. Until next time.
Happy Thanksgiving. Happy birthday week. It's Sam's birthday this week.
Thank you.
See ya.